April 8th, 1943. The dim glow of desk lamps flickered across a windowless hut in the Buckinghamshire countryside, where the air hung heavy with the scent of cigarette smoke and overheated machinery. Outside, the English spring rain pattered against the reinforced walls of Bletchley Park. But inside Hut 8, the storm was one of frantic whispers and the relentless clatter of typewriters. You can almost feel the chill seeping through the cracks, the weight of secrecy pressing down like an unseen hand on every shoulder. Alan Turing, his wire-rimmed glasses slipping down his nose, hunched over a bomber machine, a hulking electromechanical beast of rotors and wires that whirred like a trapped hornet. His fingers danced across the control panel, adjusting plugs with the precision of a surgeon. "Try the crib again," he muttered to his colleague, Joan Clark, a sharp-eyed mathematician in her mid-20s, her dark hair pinned back under the strain of another all-nighter. She nodded, her pencil scratching notes on a pad stained with T-rings, feeding possible German weather phrases into the machine's hungry maw. The bomb's drums spun faster, clicking through permutations of the Enigma cipher, that devilish German encoding device which guarded the Reich's darkest secrets. Across the Atlantic, in the dim ops room of the Admiralty in London, Captain Roderick Roger stared at a wall map dotted with pins. The pins marked the positions of Allied convoys snaking across the North Atlantic, fragile lifelines carrying tanks, fuel, and food to starving Britain. But the real ghosts on that map were the invisible ones, the U-boat wolf packs, Karl Dönitz's pack of steel sharks prowling beneath the waves. Roger's jaw tightened as a decrypt came in, stamped with the innocuous word ultra in red ink. It wasn't just a code word, it was a lifeline, pulled from the ether by those boffins at Bletchley. The message revealed a Wolfpack's rendezvous point, 500 miles west of Ireland, coordinates precise enough to thread a needle in the fog. You imagine the salt spray stinging your face as you stand on the bridge of HMS Starling, a Flower-class corvette slicing through the heaving Atlantic swells. Commander Frederick John Walker, grizzled and pipe in mouth, grips the rail, his eyes scanning the horizon, where grey skies met endless grey sea. The wind howls, carrying the metallic tang of diesel and the faint rot of seaweed. Below decks, the ASDIC operators, those sonar wizards, hunch over their screens, pinging echoes into the depths. Walker's voice cuts through the gale. "Steady as she goes, number one. We've got their scent." The Ultra Intel had rerouted his escort group just in time, positioning them like hunters, awaiting the quarry. Back in Berlin, in the stark concrete bowels of the U-boat headquarters, Admiral Karl Dönitz paced the operations room, his face a mask of controlled fury. The room buzzed with the low hum of teletype machines and the murmur of staff officers poring over charts. Smoke from Dönitz's cigar curled toward the ceiling, mingling with the acrid smell of fresh ink and stale coffee. "Verdammt!" he growled, slamming a fist on the table. Reports flooded in. U-515, commanded by Werner Zahn, had been depth-charged and forced to surface off the Azores, her hull breached by Allied destroyers that seemed to appear from nowhere. Another pack, shadowing convoy ONS-5, had been scattered like chaff in the wind, 5 boats lost to a single escort group. Dönitz's chief of staff, Captain Eberhard Gott, leaned forward, his uniform crisp despite the late hour. "Herr Admiral, it's as if they read our signals. The positions, they're too accurate." Dönitz's eyes narrowed, flicking to the Enigma machine on the side table, its keys gleaming innocently under the harsh lights. He had designed the Wolfpack tactics himself, coordinated attacks under radio silence, broken only by encrypted bursts. The Enigma was unbreakable, or so the boffins at OKW assured him. Yet here were the British, striking with surgical precision, sinking dozens of his boats, each one a dagger to the Kriegsmarine's heart. In the misty dawn over the English Channel, you hear the thunderous roar of Merlin engines as a squadron of consolidated liberators lifts off from RAF Chivanor, Pilot Officer Jack Higgins, bundled in his sheepskin flying jacket, feels the vibration rattle through his bones as the heavy bomber climbs to 20,000 feet. The cockpit smells of oil and leather, the altimeter ticking upward like a countdown to fate. Armed with ultra-derived positions, these planes aren't flying blind. They're guided by secrets that could end the war. Below, the sea churns, hiding U-515's sister ship, U-952, creeping toward a convoy. But the Liberator's lee light, that piercing search beam, sweeps the waves, catching the sub's conning tower in its glare. Depth charges tumble from the bomb bay, exploding in geysers of white foam. The U-boat's crew scrambles, klaxons wailing, as the hull shudders under the assault. At Bletchley, Turing's bomb finally chattered to a halt, lights flashing a match. "Got it," Joan whispered, her voice barely audible over the whir. The decrypt unspooled. Orders for U-68 to join a new wolf pack off Freetown. Turing's mind raced ahead, already plotting how this nugget would reroute a convoy, saving perhaps 1,000 lives. But he knew the razor edge they walked. One leak, one captured codebook mishandled, and the game was up. Ultra wasn't glory. It was shadow work, the kind that won wars without fanfare. Dunitz, back in his lair, stared at the mounting losses. 41 U-boats gone in March alone, the Atlantic graveyard swelling. His admirals whispered of phantoms, of British admirals who anticipated every move. Admiral Erich Raeder, his predecessor, had once boasted of the U-boat arm as the Reich's unbreakable spear. Now Raeder paced the halls of the Bendler block, confiding to aides that some devilish intelligence pierced their veil. "It's not battleships they fear," one staffer overheard him say, "but whatever wizardry reads our souls." The rain eased at Bletchley as dawn crept in, grey light filtering through blackout curtains. Turing stretched, his lanky frame aching, and lit another cigarette. The hut emptied slowly, operators shuffling to their billets, minds heavy with the burden of omniscience. You sense the isolation, the way each decrypt bound them tighter to the war's invisible front. Ultra was just a word on paper, a security label to cloak the impossible. But in practice, it was the ghost in the machine, the whisper that turned the tide, making German admirals glance over their shoulders at a country estate they could scarcely imagine. Walker, on the Starling's bridge, watched as another U-boat broached the surface, her white ensign tattered. "Fire!" he bellowed, and the four 7-inch guns barked, shells arcing through the spray. The sub listed, oil slicking the waves like black blood. In that moment, as the crew abandoned ship, you understand the fear Donitz harbored, not of ironclads like the Hood or Bismarck, but of the quiet codebreakers whose intellect outgunned any fleet. Bletchley Park wasn't on any nautical chart, yet it loomed larger than any dreadnought in the Admiral's nightmares. May 1943. The salt-crusted deck of HMS Starling vibrates under your boots as the last echoes of gunfire fade into the Atlantic's roar. Commander Frederick John Walker lowers his binoculars, the acrid bite of cordite lingering in the air like a bitter promise. The U-boat's wreckage settles into the depths, bubbles rising in a final mocking sigh, while survivors bob in the oil-slicked waves, their grey uniforms stark against the churning foam. Walker's pipe glows faintly as he draws on it, exhaling a plume that mingles with the diesel fumes. "Fish in the net, lads," he calls to his crew, his voice steady despite the exhaustion etching lines deeper into his weathered face. But you sense the undercurrent. These kills aren't luck. They're the fruit of whispers from a place no sailor ever sees. Aboard the captured U-515, now towed toward the Azores under guard, Lieutenant Commander David G.M. Carey of the Royal Navy steps gingerly over twisted metal and scattered charts. The sub's conning tower still reeks of fear sweat and burnt wiring, the Enigma machine bolted to its table, its rotors frozen in mid-spin like a guilty secret caught in the act. Carey's gloved hands sift through the officers' quarters, a dog-eared codebook, half burned in the panic of scuttling, its pages curling like dying leaves. He pockets a fragment, heart pounding with the gravity of it. This isn't just salvage, it's a key to the abyss. Radio operator Hans Becker, one of the few survivors, cowers in a corner, his eyes wide with the shock of surfacing into daylight. The messages. They knew. He mutters in broken English, his accent thick as the fog rolling in. Carey doesn't respond, but the words hang heavy, a confirmation of the invisible hand guiding the hunt. Back at Bletchley Park, the spring sun filters weakly through the hut's blinds, casting striped shadows on the wooden floor strewn with discarded punch cards. Joan Clark rubs her temples, the hum of the bomb now a familiar lullaby in her ears. It's been weeks since that first breakthrough on U-68 signals, but the machines never sleep. Turing paces nearby, his footsteps soft on the creaking boards, debating with Peter Hilton, a young linguist with ink-stained fingers and a perpetual squint. "The cribs are evolving," Turing says, his voice low and clipped, gesturing at a chalkboard scrawled with German naval jargon, phrases like Wetterbericht for weather reports, the predictable chaff the Enigma wrapped around real orders. Hilton nods, feeding a new reel of tape into the machine, its whir building like a storm-gathering force. The air tastes of stale tea and ozone from the sparking relays, every click a step closer to unraveling another layer of the cipher's labyrinth. In the Admiralty's war room, the map updates ripple outward like stones in a pond. Captain Roger pins a fresh marker, convoy HX 237, 40 merchant ships, heavy with Canadian timber and American steel, threading the Wolfpack gauntlet 600 miles south of Greenland. Ultra-decrypts, fresh from the courier's motorcycles, reveal Admiral Donitz's latest gambit, a reshuffled pack led by U-221 under Captain Lieutenant Troxler, poised to strike at dawn. Roger's fingers trace the route, the room's fluorescent buzz underscoring the tension. Walker's group again, he decides, scribbling orders for the western approaches. No grand fleet maneuvers, just precise nudges. Reroute the convoy 10 degrees east. Shadow with destroyers HMS Wild Goose and Wren. It's chess, not broadsides, and Bletchley holds the board. You feel the deck pitch as you brace against the rail of HMS Wild Goose, the smaller sloop cutting through swells that slap icy spray across your face. Lieutenant Commander Jocelyn S.W. Cook, Walker's second, scans the radar scope, its green glow illuminating his sharp features. The ASDIC pings echo in the damp confines below, operators calling out depths like priests intoning a litany. "Contact! Bearing 240!" one shouts, and the ship heels into a hard turn, screws churning foam. Ultra had pinpointed the Wolfpack's refueling rendezvous, a shadowed patch of ocean where U-221 lurked, her diesel tanks low after days of fruitless patrol. Cook's voice crackles over the tannoy. "Action stations! Hedgehog away!" The forward launcher thumps, mortars arcing into the sea, exploding in a circle of underwater fury that rattles the hull like thunder from below. Berlin's U-boat command pulses with urgency under the dim chandeliers of the Reich Chancellery Annex. Dönitz stands rigid, his iron cross glinting as he pores over dispatches from Fregattenkapitän Heinrich Lieber, commander of the Second Flotilla. The room smells of polished leather and machine oil, teletypes clacking like impatient fingers. "Another one gone? U-221 didn't even transmit a contact report," Lieber reports, his face pale, uniform rumpled from sleepless nights. Dönitz's fist clenches around his pencil, snapping it. "It's impossible. The Enigma changes daily. No one cracks it." Beep, but doubt creeps in, a worm in the apple. Gott, ever the pragmatist, suggests tighter radio discipline, but Dönitz waves it off. He recalls the early triumphs, U-47's Scapa Flow raid, the sinkings off convoy SC-122, but now losses mount. 23 boats in April, crews vanishing into the deep without a fight. Whispers among the staff point to spies, to captured Enigmas like the one from U-110 in 41. But Dönitz knows better. This is predation, surgical and relentless. Off the convoy's flank, you hear the scream of diving aircraft before you see them. From RAF Reykjavik, short Sunderlands, flying boats with their blunt noses and blister guns, swoop low, engines droning like angry bees. Pilot Officer Reginald Ellis grips the yoke, the cabin vibrating with power, the scent of aviation fuel sharp in his nostrils. Ultra coordinates burned into his nav charts guide them straight to U-68's patrol line, the sub surfacing for air in a fatal mistake. "Bombs away!" Ellis calls, and the charges plunge, erupting in columns of water that rock the sea. Below, Captain Lieutenant Carl Friedrich Merton orders a crash dive, claxons blaring as water floods the bilges. The hull groans under depth charges from escort HMS Vidette, her crew cheering as echoes confirm a hit. Merton's log, later recovered, would note the uncanny timing, a frustration etched in salt-stained ink. At Bletchley, the decrypts pile up like autumn leaves. Turing and Clark celebrate quietly, a shared cup of watery cocoa, as a batch reveals Dunitz's shift to the mid-Atlantic gap, exploiting a perceived blind spot in Allied air cover. But the codebreakers anticipate it, their models predicting the move weeks ahead. Hilton deciphers a key setting from a captured weather cipher, the bomb's lights dancing in triumph. "They're blind to their own vulnerability," Turing murmurs, but his eyes betray the strain, the constant fear of a German countermeasure, a new rotor or altered procedure that could silence the flow. Dönitz convenes a midnight briefing, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. Admiral Raeder, sidelined but influential, joins via secure line from his estate, his tone grave. "Carl, the fleet whispers of ghosts. Our admirals fear not Ark Royal's successors, but this intelligence that strikes from the shadows." Dönitz nods grimly, staring at the Enigma on his desk. Losses hit 50 for the month. Wolf packs fracturing under the weight. In private, he confides to Gott, "If they read us, we're done." Bletchley, I've heard rumors, a park-turned-fortress. But how? The name sticks, a spectre in the Admiral's mind, more formidable than any battleship's guns. As twilight falls over the convoy, Walker on Starling logs another evasion, the wolf pack scattering like smoke. You taste victory in the wind, salty and hard-won, knowing the real battle rages not on waves, but in hushed huts where minds wage war with machines. Ultra's shadow lengthens, turning the tide one decrypt at a time, embedding fear deeper into the heart of the Kriegsmarine. June 1943. The humid air of the Bay of Biscay clings to your skin like a damp shroud as you crouch in the waist gunner's turret of a Vickers Wellington bomber, the twin engines throbbing through the aluminum frame. The sea below stretches like molten lead under a moonless sky, broken only by the white caps of waves whipped by a stiff westerly. Sergeant Tom Riley, his leather helmet chafed from endless patrols, peers through the blister window, the cold bite of the slipstream numbing his fingers on the trigger of the 303 Browning. "Eyes sharp, lads!" crackles the pilot's voice over the intercom. Wing Commander Edward Cheeseman, his Oxford accent clipped with urgency. Ultra had decrypted a flurry of signals from U-68's flotilla, revealing a bold sortie from Lorient, Dönitz's desperate push to reclaim the convoy lanes before the Allies could seal them. Tonight, RAF Coastal Command isn't hunting blind. They're ghosts with coordinates etched in invisible ink. The Wellington banks low, skimming 500 feet above the swells, the salt spray almost close enough to taste. In the nose, the lee light operator flicks the switch, and a beam like a searchlight from hell spears the darkness, illuminating a sleek shadow slicing the surface. U-377, under Oberleutnant zur See Heinz-Eugen Eberbach, her conning tower cutting foam as she recharges batteries. Eberbach's head snaps up from the bridge, his binoculars glinting in the glare. "Alarm, Tauken!" he bellows, the klaxon shrieking through the hull as the diesels cough to a halt. Water cascades over the deck, men scrambling for hatches, but it's too late. The Wellington's depth charges straddle the dive, erupting in thunderous plumes that lift the sub's stern like a breaching whale. You feel the shockwave rattle your teeth, the aircraft shuddering as flak bursts pepper the sky, tracer rounds stitching red lines toward the bomber. Back in the shadowed corridors of Bletchley Park, the summer heat turns Hut 6 into a sweatbox, fans whirring futilely against the press of bodies and machines. Harry Hinsley, the naval intelligence liaison, a bespectacled Oxford don with a pipe perpetually clenched in his teeth, sifts through a stack of fresh decrypts, the paper crisp under his fingertips. The air reeks of ink and cooling fans from the Typex machines, their keys clacking like distant gunfire. Beside him, Max Newman, the probabilistic mathematician, adjusts a prototype Colossus computer in the corner, a behemoth of valves and wiring that hums with electric life, cracking the layered Lorenz ciphers feeding into Enigma traffic. Dönitz is shifting south, Hinsley murmurs, tracing a finger over a grid map pinned to the wall, where coloured threads mark wolf-pack routes like veins on a dying body. Joan Clark, now promoted to junior assistant, leans in, her blouse damp at the collar, pencil hovering. The weather shorts are holding, nil pegs for no precipitation, but they're layering dummy traffic. Turing's team caught 3 feints last week. The decrypts spill secrets, orders for U-530, commanded by Kapitän-Leutnant Kurt Lange, to probe the Gibraltar Strait, aiming to sever the Mediterranean lifeline. Hinsley nods to a Wren, Women's Royal Naval Service operator, Petty Officer Dilys Jones, who relays the intel via secure teleprinter to the Admiralty. The room pulses with quiet intensity, every keystroke a weapon forged in silence. You sense the fragility, the way one overlooked anomaly could unravel it all, but the flow is steady, Ultra's vein pumping life into the Allied veins. In the steel heart of U-boat pens at Brest, the clang of welders echoes off concrete walls, slick with condensation. Kapitän-Leutnant Otto Kretschmer, the famed Silent Otto, returned from a POW camp, inspects U-23's refit, his Iron Cross tucked under a fresh tunic. The harbour smells of tar and brine, cranes groaning as they lower a new snorkel tube, Dönitz's hedge against air patrols. But Kretschmer's eyes, sharp as ever, flick to the radio shack where Enigma operators test keys under dim red lights. The traffic's too quiet, he confides to his executive officer, Lieutenant zur See Fritz Grau, as they share a flask of ersatz coffee, bitter as defeat. Reports from the front trickle in. U-377 depth charge to scrap, her crew fished from rafts by neutral Spanish trawlers. Dönitz's directives urge caution, radio silence except for essentials, but Kretschmer smells the trap. They're waiting for us, Fritz, like spiders in the web. Admiralty House, London, swelters under a rare heat wave, the war room ceiling fans stirring papers on oak tables scarred by cigarette burns. Vice Admiral Max Horton, Commander-in-Chief Western Approaches, pause over the ultra-dispatches, his bulldog face set in grim lines. The room hums with the murmur of plotting officers, the scent of polished brass and fresh tobacco heavy. Horton stubs out his cigar, barking to his Chief of Staff, Commodore George Creasy. Walker gets another crack at them. Starling Group to intercept off Cape Finisterre. The map blooms with fresh pins. Convoy MKF-17, laden with troops from Algiers, twisting through U-boat shadows. Ultra reveals the noose tightening, U-530's patrol line crossed with pinpoint accuracy. Horton's orders fly out. Air cover from Gibraltar, escorts HMS Offer and Obdurate to shadow. No fanfare, just the cold calculus of lives saved. You grip the railing of HMS Offer, a sturdy destroyer bucking through the Biscay rollers, the deck slick with spray that stings like needles. Lieutenant Commander Michael Villiers, pipe clenched against the wind, confers with the Asdic hut below, where leading seaman Alfie Bates calls bearings, Echo at 200 yards, closing fast. The ship surges, screws thrashing white water as hedgehog mortars spit their pattern into the sea. Explosions bloom subsurface, the hull vibrating with each hammer blow. U-530 twists in the depths, Lange ordering silent running, his crew frozen in the red-lit control room, breath shallow, the drip of condensation loud as accusations. But the pings find her, charges bracketing true. A direct hit crumples the pressure hull, air bubbling up in frantic gasps. Berlin's naval high command reeks of desperation under the marble arches of the OKW. Dönitz storms into the briefing room, his face thunderous, uniform askew from a sleepless drive from the front. The air tastes of stale sauerkraut and wax polish, charts spread across a long table lit by harsh bulbs. Eberhard Gott, his operations chief, stands at attention, voice steady. Herr Admiral, losses in Biscay alone. 7 boats this fortnight. The RAF appears at will. It's as if they anticipate our battery runs. Dönitz wheels on a signals expert, Korvettenkapitän Hans-Joachim von Rohen, slamming a fist that scatters pencils. The Enigma? Secure? Von Rohen nods vigorously, but sweat beads on his brow. Whispers circulate. Captured codebooks from U-559 last October, fed to Bletchley. Dönitz paces, cigar ash trailing like defeat. Admiral Raeder, lurking in the shadows via proxy notes, scrawls a memo. This intelligence eclipses Jutland's ghosts. Bletchley Park, curse the name, wields sharper blades than any carrier strike. In the aftermath, survivors from U-530 wash ashore near Corunna, their tales fragmented but damning. Lang, bandaged and hollow-eyed in a Spanish hospital, mutters to interrogators about hunters who knew our breath. The fragment reaches MI6 channels, looping back to Bletchley, where Hinsley files it away, a grim trophy. Turing, emerging from isolation with a new algorithm for 4-rotor Enigmas, shares a rare smile with Clark over decrypts predicting Dönitz's July redeployment to the Azores Gap. They're cornered, he says, the hut's fans whispering agreement. Off the convoy's bow, Villiers on offer watches the oil slick spread, a black shroud on the waves. Another for the ledger, he logs, the crew's cheers muted by fatigue. You taste the turning point in the salt air. Ultra's decrypts not just saving ships, but eroding the Wolfpack's soul. Dönitz's admirals convene in hushed tones, their fears crystallizing around a pastoral estate in England, a place without guns, yet deadlier than the mightiest fleet. The war's invisible front advances, one broken cipher at a time, as summer storms gather over the Atlantic. July 1943. The relentless summer sun beats down on the cracked tarmac of RAF St. Eval in Cornwall, turning the air into a shimmering haze that warps the horizon like a mirage. You wipe sweat from your brow, the coarse fabric of your flight suit chafing against salt-streaked skin as the ground crew swarms around the consolidated Liberator Giard V, her 4 Pratt & Whitney engines idling with a throaty rumble that vibrates through your bones. Flying Officer Harold Tommy Thompson settles into the pilot's seat, his gloved hands flexing on the control column, the cockpit alive with the scent of hot oil and canvas. The nav table beside him bristles with charts marked in red pencil, ultra-derived grids pinpointing a Wolfpack refueling in the mid-Atlantic void, 800 miles west of the Azores. "Crew, stand by," Thompson calls over the intercom, his voice steady amid the creak of struts and the distant crash of waves against the cliffs below. Dönitz's latest directive, cracked just hours ago at Bletchley, orders U-454 under Oberleutnant zur See Ulrich Eli Lewis to link with tankers for a push against convoy BHX-245 carrying vital bauxite from Brazil to starving factories in Birmingham. The Liberator lumbers into the sky, climbing through thermals that buffet the wings like invisible fists, the altimeter spinning toward 10,000 feet. Below, the Atlantic sprawls in endless blue, flecked with whitecaps that hint at the storms brewing farther out. In the Bombay, you brace against the chill slipstream whistling through vents, the weight of 4 250-pound depth charges tugging at your harness. The Lee light technician tests the beam, a practice flicker illuminating the instrument panel in stark white. Ultra's whisper has rerouted the convoy, slipping it through a gap in the U-boat screen. But tonight's the hammer. Strike the tankers. Starve the packs. Thompson banks starboard, following the gyro compass's unerring tick, the drone of props drowning out the knot of tension in your gut. Deep in the green heart of Bletchley Park, Hut 8 bakes under the midday glare, filtering through half-drawn blinds, the wooden walls groaning as if protesting the heat. Alan Turing slumps at his desk, shirt sleeves rolled to the elbows, a fan stirring the stale air thick with the tang of solder and spent tea leaves. His fingers, ink-blackened, trace columns of figures on a slide rule, cross-referencing cribs against the latest Enigma traffic, short signals from U-454's weather reports, laced with dummy orders to mask the real thrust south. Joan Clark, her hair frizzing in the humidity, hunches over a Hollerith sorter, cards clicking through like teeth in a gear. The naval keys shifted, shark variant again, she says, voice low, passing a sheet to Peter Hilton, who feeds it into the bomb's maw. The machine awakens with a growl, rotors whirring in a symphony of frustration and breakthrough, sparks flying from overloaded contacts. Turing mutters, "If we miss this window, Horton's convoys bleed out." The decrypt unspools. Coordinates for the Milchku tanker U-460, a floating gas station vital to Dönitz's extended patrols. One hit, and the wolf packs wither on the vine. Across the channel, in the fortified bunkers of Keroman near Lorient, the clamour of riveting hammers echoes off damp concrete vaults, where U-boats nest like hibernating beasts. Kapitan Lieutenant Friedrich Karl Marx, commander of U-340, strides the pen's walkway, his boots splashing in oily puddles, the air heavy with the reek of paint and diesel exhaust. Crewmen swarm the deck, loading torpedoes with grunts and curses, their faces gaunt under steel helmets. Marx pauses at the radio compartment, where Fähnrich zur Klaus Weber tests the Enigma, keys clacking under red-shaded lamps. "Signals minimal, Herr Callot," Weber reports. But Marx's eyes narrow at the latest flimsy. Orders to avoid Biscay air patrols, hugging the coast under snorkel. Whispers from returning boats paint a grim picture. U-454 ambushed at refuel, her tanker shredded by Liberator bombs, oil fires lighting the night like a funeral pyre. "The Tommies smell us out," Marx growls to his watch officer, Lieutenant Paul Schneider, as they share a cigarette in the shadows, the smoke curling toward vents humming with filtered air. Dönitz's memos urge faith in the cipher, but the losses, 12 boats in July alone, gnaw like rats in the bulkheads. In the Admiralty's ops centre, buried under Whitehall's stone facade, the air conditioner wheezes against the summer swelter, maps fluttering on walls, slick with condensation. Vice Admiral Max Horton leans over the plotting table, his stubby fingers moving pins with surgical care. The room's hum undercut by the scratch of pencils and the murmur of wrens relaying teletapes. Commodore Geoffrey Baker, his aide, unfolds a fresh ultra-sheaf. U-340's patrol line intersects convoy MKF-20 off Casablanca, troops and jeeps for the Italian push. Thompson's squadron gets the nod, Horton decides. Voice gravelly from cigars, scribbling dispersal orders. Escorts HMS Keppel and Orwell to weave a protective screen. The tanker's demise has forced Dönitz to ration fuel, packs fragmenting like shattered glass. Horton glances at a side chart, 87 U-boats sunk since May, the Atlantic's graveyards swelling. "Bletchley's our ace," he confides to Baker, the words heavy with the secret's burden. No grand announcements, just the quiet rerouting that turns hunters into hunted. You feel the Liberator descend, the altimeter unwinding as Thompson levels at 2,500 feet, the sea rushing up like a dark mirror. The moon breaks through clouds, silvering the waves, and there, a silhouette against the horizon. U-460's bulk, hoses snaking to U-454's deck, crews lit by work lamps like fireflies in hell. "Target acquired," the co-pilot breathes, and the bomb bay doors yawn open, wind howling through. Depth charges tumble in a stick, plunging with whistles before erupting in geysers that dwarf the tanker, flames erupting as fuel ignites in a roaring inferno. Lures on U-454 screams orders, diving frantically, but the secondary blasts rock her, hull plates buckling. Flak from the tanker peppers the sky, shells bursting close enough to pepper the fuselage with shrapnel, but Thompson hauls back, the Liberator climbing through smoke that stings your eyes like acid. Berlin's naval war staff convenes in the dim-lit OKW basement, the air thick with the sour tang of unwashed uniforms and cooling coffee. Admiral Karl Dönitz stands at the head of the oak table, his face a storm cloud, iron cross pinned to a tunic strained at the seams. Eberhard Gott spreads charts, voice tight. Fuel crisis, Herr Admiral, U-460 gone, 3 packs idled off Freetown. Korvettenkapitän Kurt Freiwald, signals chief, stammers defenses of the Enigma, but Dönitz cuts him off, slamming a report. U-340, depth charged by escorts that materialized from fog, her snorkel no shield. They predict our breaths, Dönitz snarls, pacing, boots thudding on linoleum. Admiral Eric Raeder, observing from a side chair, his once vital frame shrunken, leans forward. Karl, it's beyond tactics. This Bletchley, rumors from agents painted as a code nexus, devouring our secrets, more lethal than Nimitz's carriers or King's battleships. Gott nods grimly, tallying. 20 sinkings in the convoy lanes, wolf packs down to 200 operational boats. Dönitz stares at the Enigma prototype on a shelf, its dials mocking him, doubt festering like an open wound. At Bletchley, evening shadows lengthen across the estate's lawns as Turing emerges from the hut, lighting a pipe, the tobacco's earthy bite cutting the floral air. Clark joins him, a rare moment's respite, watching fireflies dance. Dönitz is pulling back. Azor's focus next, she says, decrypt in hand. The bomb's triumphs mount, but so does the strain. German trials with new rotors loom. You sense the precipice, Ultra's edge sharpening as the wolf packs falter. Off Casablanca, Keppel's screws churn as Captain Ian McGahey watches the oil slick from U-340 spread, survivors signaling weakly from rafts. "Log it! Ultra strike!" he orders, the crew's exhaustion masked by resolve. The convoy slips through unscathed, another thread in the noose. In Dönitz's nightmares, Bletchley rises not as bricks and mortar, but a spectral arsenal, its codebreakers the true admirals of the deep, feared more than any steel leviathan slicing the waves. August 1943. The oppressive heat of a Biscay afternoon clings to the flight deck of HMS Biter, an escort carrier churning through the swells off the Portuguese coast, her flight deck baking under a relentless sun that turns the steel into a griddle. You shield your eyes against the glare, the tang of avgas and sun-warmed tar thick in your nostrils as swordfish biplanes, those sturdy old string bags, taxi into position, their Pegasus engines coughing to life with a throaty roar. Lieutenant Commander Eugene "Red" O'Neill, the squadron leader, adjusts his helmet strap in the cockpit, the canvas vibrating under his boots as the prop bites air. Ultra decrypts, hot off the wire from Bletchley, have painted the picture. Dönitz's fragmented wolf packs, starved of fuel and forced into desperate surface runs, with U-262 under Lieutenant Zurzay Heinz Franke, probing for stragglers from convoy PA-23, laden with South African chrome for Spitfire fuselages. O'Neill's martlets, upgraded fighters slung with depth charges, aren't patrolling. They're executing a kill order, coordinates precise to the nautical mile. The carrier's deck heaves as the catapult twangs, slinging the first martlet airborne, wings folding back mid-climb, the slipstream whipping salt spray across your face. Below, the sea heaves in lazy undulations, hiding the steel hunters in its depths. O'Neill levels at 5,000 feet, the cockpit's leather creaking, radio crackling with vectors from the carrier's radar. Bandits at 20 miles south-southwest. The air up here tastes clean, laced with exhaust, but tension coils like a spring. Ultra's revelations have turned the bay into a shooting gallery, RAF and RN aircraft, claiming a dozen boats in the last week alone. Franca's U-262, low on batteries after evading patrols, surfaces for a hurried snort, her diesel exhaust a telltale plume on the horizon. In the cloistered quiet of Bletchley Park's Block F, the late summer light slants through reinforced windows, casting long shadows over racks of humming Colossus machines, those valve-filled monsters devouring tape loops like insatiable beasts. Tommy Flowers, the postal engineer turned code-cracking savant, wipes grease from his hands on a rag, the air electric with the ozone snap of relays and the faint whiff of warm bakelight. Beside him, Bill Tutt, the young mathematician with a shock of unruly hair, tweaks a wiring panel, his voice a murmur amid the mechanical symphony. The Lorenz traffic spiking, Dönitz's hedging with hand ciphers, Tuta says, feeding a fresh reel punched with German naval short signals. Joan Clark, sleeves pinned up against the stuffy warmth, cross-checks against Enigma cribs on a nearby desk, cluttered with ashtrays and dog-eared Admiralty manuals. Alan Turing, pacing the aisle with his characteristic loping gait, pauses to peer at the output, decrypted orders for U-262 to shadow a fainted convoy route, a ploy to draw escorts away from the real prize, HX-252, 50 merchants bulging with Lend-Lease tanks rumbling toward Liverpool. Predictable, Turing mutters, his pipe unlit, mind already leaping to countermeasures. The flow of Ultra has swelled, Bletchley's output doubling since spring, but each decrypt carries the shadow of risk. German suspicions mounting, trials with a 4-rotor Enigma variant whispered in intercepted traffic. Deep in the concrete labyrinth of the Atlantic Wall at Saint-Nazaire, the thunder of Atlantic wall guns drills into the fog-shrouded morning, but inside the U-boat bunker, the mood is leaden. Korvettenkapitän Adalbert Schnee, survivor of earlier patrols and now flotilla training officer, inspects U-505's crew on the wet slipway, the hull looming like a grey leviathan under floodlights that buzz like angry wasps. The air reeks of wet wool and machine oil, rivulets of condensation dripping from the vaulted ceiling. Schnee's boots echo on the grated deck as he drills the watch. Silent running protocols, snorkel drills to evade the RAF's noose. The surface is death, he barks to his executive, Oberleutnant zur See Hans-Jürgen Haupt, who nods grimly, uniform damp from the perpetual mist. Dispatches from Dönitz arrive via courier, avoid radio bursts, rely on dead reckoning, but losses tell another tale. U-262's last garbled signal cut off mid-sentence, presumed pounced by carrier planes that appeared from clear skies. Schnee glances at the Enigma in the radio shack, its case scarred from hasty packing. If they crack this, he confides to Haupt over lukewarm schnapps in the officers' mess, the room's low ceiling pressing down, we're blind wolves. Dönitz's faith in the machine wavers in private memos, paranoia seeping like seawater through seams. Whitehall's subterranean map room pulses with the click of heels on tile, the air conditioned to a crisp chill that raises gooseflesh under starched collars. Rear Admiral John Edelston, Deputy Chief of Naval Staff, hunches over the grand table, his pipe sending curls of smoke toward the ventilation grates, mingling with the scent of fresh-milled charts. The walls bristle with overlays, red lines for Wolfpack routes, blue for Allied sweeps, pins clustering like wounds around the Azores Gap. A Wren lieutenant, Sub-Lieutenant Margaret Ellis, clips a new ultra-flimsy U-505 under Captain Lieutenant Peter Zeck, tasked with interdicting PA-23's tankers, her position betrayed by a weather cipher slip. Edelston's eyes narrow, tracing the intercept path. Biter's group closes the trap. O'Neill's birds will flush her. Orders cascade. HFDF vans, those high-frequency direction-finding trucks, to triangulate any desperate transmissions, escorts HMS Farn and Hostile to pincer. The room's tension hums like a live wire. Ultra has tilted the scales, convoy losses plummeting to single digits monthly, but the cost gnaws, Bletchley's secrecy a chain around every neck. You jolt in the Martlet's rear cockpit as O'Neill dives, the engines scream peaking, G-forces pinning you to the seat, the sea rushing up in a blur of foam and shadow. There, U-262's periscope shears the surface, then the conning tower broaches, Franca ordering an emergency dive as lookouts spot the incoming planes. "Bombs away!" O'Neill yells, the rack shuddering as charges release, plummeting into the water with splashes that erupt in white fury, straddling the sub's flank. The hull heaves, metal groaning audibly even from above, air bursting from vents in frantic bubbles. Flak from the deck gun arcs wild, shells whining past the wingtip, but a second Martlet circles, machine guns chattering to rake the bridge. Franca slumps, bloodied as the boat lists, crew spilling into the sea like spilled dice. O'Neill pulls up, the acrid smoke of explosions trailing, radio confirming the kill. One more Wolfpack link severed, the convoy threading safe. In Berlin's dimly lit Bendler block, the clack of typewriters underscores the midnight briefing, the room's oak panels absorbing the low voices like confessions. Admiral Karl Dönitz, gaunt under the green-shaded lamps, pores over a ledger of irreplaceable losses. 15 U-boats in August, fuel depots aflame, crews adrift on the currents. Eberhard Gott, his chief, spreads intercepts, Allied movements too prescient for coincidence. Herr Admiral, the Enigma's sanctity, questioned even by OKW cryptographers. Dönitz's hand trembles on his cigar, ash flaking onto reports from Saint-Nazaire, U-505 shadowed. Her snorkel pings betrayed by shipborne detectors. Admiral Erich Raeder, a spectral presence in correspondence, urges a cipher overhaul. His words venomous. Bletchley devours us whole. Its shadows eclipse the Royal Navy's dreadnoughts. Dönitz, recall the packs or watch them bleed dry. Dönitz stares into the middle distance, the weight of command crushing, whispers of treason or superhuman foes circling like U-boats in the fog. The Admiral's fear solidifies. Not the thunder of battleship salvos, but the silent intellect of an English park, unraveling the Reich's naval spine, thread by thread. At Bletchley, as dusk paints the estate in bruised purples, Turing and Clark review the day's haul in the emptying hut, the Colossus winding down with a sigh. They're fracturing. Dönitz is redeployed to the Indian Ocean next, Clark notes, her voice weary but triumphant. Flowers adjusts a valve, the machine's hum fading to silence. You feel the momentum building, Ultra's decrypts not just sinking subs but starving the Wolfpack's will. Embedding Bletchley as the Kriegsmarine's unspoken terror, a ciphered spectre more daunting than any armada on the horizon. September 1943. The autumn gales howl across the North Atlantic, whipping the deck of HMS Vidette into a frenzy of spray and creaking timbers. The destroyer's hull slicing through waves that tower like grey walls ready to crash down. You cling to the wet railing, salt crusting your eyelashes, the wind tearing at your oilskin as it carries the sharp sting of ozone and distant rain. Lieutenant Commander Michael T.S. Meller stands resolute on the bridge, his binoculars pressed to his eyes, the lenses fogging slightly in the chill. The wheelhouse smells of damp wool and hot brass from the voice pipes, ASDIC pings echoing faintly from below, like the heartbeat of the hunt. Ultra's latest decrypts, smuggled in a sealed canister from Bletchley via fast courier boat, have vectored Vidette's group straight to the remnants of Dönitz's shattered wolf packs. U-341 under Oberleutnant Zurzee Werner Jahn, limping fuel-starved toward a phantom rendezvous 400 miles northwest of Ireland, her torpedoes unfired after weeks of evasion. Meller's voice cuts through the gale over the tannoy. "Full ahead, both! Hedgehog crews, stand ready!" The ship surges, screws thrashing foam, as the sonar operator's call rings out, "Contact, sir! Submerged 800 yards, fine on the starboard bow." Below decks, the Hedgehog launcher thuds, spouting 24 projectiles in a deadly rosette that plunge into the depths, detonating in muffled booms that send shockwaves rippling up through the keel. You feel the deck shudder, the sea boiling around the hull, as U-341 twists desperately, Jan ordering emergency blow to the tanks, her bow breaching in a froth of air and oil. The conning tower erupts from the waves, claxons wailing across the water, German crewmen scrambling onto the slick deck, faces pale masks of terror under the searchlight's glare. Vedettes 4. 7-inch guns elevate with a hydraulic whine, barking shells that straddle the sub, one punching through the pressure hull in a gout of steam and fire. Jan's last order, a frantic radio burst for help, fades into static, intercepted and logged at Bletchley before it even clears the ether. In the leafy seclusion of Bletchley Park, the first crisp leaves skitter across the gravel paths outside Hut 11, where the chill seeps under the doors despite the pot-bellied stove's glow. I.J. Good. The lanky statistician with a pipe clenched in his teeth huddles over a desk piled with graph paper and tea-stained reports, the air thick with the musty scent of old books and whirring fans from the experimental Robinson machines, precursors to full digital beasts, crunching probabilities on teleprinter tape. Joan Clark, bundled in a wool cardigan against the draught, collates the afternoon's haul. Enigma traffic from the 7th Flotilla at St. Nazaire, cribbed from predictable phrases like immediate weather report, masking orders for U-539's abortive patrol. Dönitz is pulling everything back to Norwegian fjords, she says to Max Newman, who adjusts a valve on the humming Colossus, its racks of glowing thermionic valves casting an eerie blue light across his wire-rimmed glasses. The machine devours input, lights flickering like synapses firing, spitting out decrypted coordinates that reveal the Wolfpack's death throes, fuel rationed to sips, crews rotating home for want of targets. Alan Turing, entering with a sheaf of Admiralty queries, nods grimly, his voice a murmur amid the clatter. The gap's closed, no more blackouts, our airfields reach everywhere now. The hut pulses with quiet victory, each keystroke on the Typex a nail in the Kriegsmarine's coffin, but the codebreakers' faces bear the lines of vigilance. German experiments with the elephant rotor variant, glimpsed in faint signals, a spectre on the horizon. Deep within the fortified sprawl of La Pallice U-boat base, the roar of construction crews echoes off the massive concrete domes, welding torches sparking like fireflies in the perpetual twilight of the pens. Kapitän-Leutnant Hans-Dietrich von Tiesenhausen, veteran of U-331's audacious hit on HMS Barham, paces the quay beside U-350's refit, his greatcoat flapping in the drafts from ventilation shafts. The harbour air reeks of creosote and rotting fish, mingled with the acrid bite of acid from battery recharges. Crews swarm the hull, bolting on acoustic decoys, Dönitz's latest gambit against Aztec, but Tiesenhausen's eyes, shadowed by fatigue, fix on the radio officer testing the Enigma M4, its 4 rotors spinning with a mechanical sigh under dim bulbs. "No traffic today, Herr Kalou," the petty officer reports, but von Tiesenhausen waves it off, joining his first watch officer, Lieutenant Zursee Karl Brandt, in the dim wardroom where a single bulb swings overhead. Over watery grog, they pore over a crumpled dispatch. U-341 gone without trace, her position known only to the High Command. "It's sorcery," Brandt whispers, voice echoing off riveted bulkheads. Dönitz rages in Berlin, orders to disband packs, shift to mine-laying off Murmansk. Von Tiesenhausen stubs out his cigarette, the smoke curling like ghosts. Rumours from OKW hint at a British code factory, a place called Bletchley, where minds sharper than torpedoes unravel the unbreakable. The pens, once hives of wolfish ambition, now feel like tombs. The sea outside a graveyard patrolled by unseen eyes. In the Admiralty's vaulted nerve centre beneath the citadel in Plymouth, the storm outside rattles the reinforced windows, but inside, the air hums with the steady tick of clocks and the rustle of signal pads. Vice Admiral Sir Max Kennedy Horton, his uniform hung with campaign ribbons, leans on the edge of the situation table, the polished wood scarred from months of urgent briefings. The room smells of beeswax and pipe tobacco, maps alive with coloured tapes marking the death spiral. Convoy on 205, threading unscathed through what was once Wolfpack heartland, Ultra's hand guiding escorts HMS Starling and Wild Goose to scatter the last stragglers. Commodore Geoffrey Baker unfolds the final decrypt of the day. Dönitz's directive to withdraw all Type 7s to safe havens. The Atlantic campaign effectively broken. Horton's gravelly voice breaks the hush. Gentlemen, the tide turns not with battleships, but with those boffins and their infernal machines. He pins a black marker over the mid-ocean void. 87 sinking since March, merchant losses halved, the lifeline to America secure. Baker nods, relaying to Walker via secure line. Support aircraft en route, finish them. No parades, just the cold satisfaction of a war shortened by years. Ultra's secrets, the unacknowledged arsenal. You ride the gale on Starling's Bridge as Commander Frederick John Walker spots the oil trail from U-539. The sub's desperate surface dash betrayed by a faint radio squeal triangulated by shore stations. "Engage!" Walker bellows, pipe forgotten in his teeth, the 4.7s thundering in reply. Shells arc through the rain-lashed sky, slamming home amidships, the U-boat erupting in flames that light the waves like a beacon. Survivors splash into the froth, arms waving as depth charges from the kites. Tiny aircraft trailed astern, chase shadows below. Walker's log entry, scrawled later in the dim wardroom, notes the uncanny precision. Intelligence impeccable, Bletchley strikes again. Berlin's naval headquarters, buried under the Reichstag's shadow, reeks of damp stone and despair, as Admiral Karl Dönitz convenes his war council in the flickering light of paraffin lamps. Power rationed even here. The table groans under stacks of funeral manifests. 120 U-boats lost in 5 months. The wolf packs reduced to whispers. Eberhard Gott, hollow-cheeked, spreads the final tallies, his voice cracking. "Herr Admiral, the Enigma compromised. Captured books from U-559 confirmed it." Dönitz slumps, his iron cross heavy on his chest, staring at the silent teletypes. Admiral Erich Raeder, frail but fierce, grips the table's edge from his advisory perch. "Karl, we've bled for a phantom. Bletchley Park, that accursed estate, has gutted us cleaner than any task force. Its codebreakers are the true sea lords, more feared than the Arkansas or the Duke of York." Dönitz nods, the admission bitter as gall. Memos to Hitler plead for a cipher rebirth, but the damage is done. The Atlantic secured, D-Day's invasion fleets massing unmolested. In private, Dönitz paces his quarters, the name Bletchley a curse on his lips, a pastoral phantom that sank his dreams deeper than any torpedo. At Bletchley, as October's frost rims the windows, Turing and Clark share a final decrypt in the emptying hut, the bomb silent for the night. "The packs are ghosts now," Turing says, extinguishing his cigarette, the estate's lawn silver under moonlight. Ultra fades into legend, its code word a veil over triumphs that shaved years from the war, embedding eternal dread in the Admirals' souls. Not of iron behemoths thundering across the waves, but of quiet intellects in an English park, wielding decryption as the deadliest weapon afloat.